In the endless darkness of space, there were beings who believed they were untouchable. They called themselves Illyrians. For thousands of years, the Illyrians ruled star systems without fear. They were tall, radiant, and strange, flesh like crystal, voices like music, eyes glowing with eternal light. But their greatest power was not their beauty, or their weapons, or their ships. It was the belief that death could never reach them. Diseases passed through their bodies like whispers. No blade, no fire, no poison lasted against their flesh. When lesser species grew sick, Illyrians only watched. When others grew old, Illyrians stayed the same, unchanged, untouched. To them, death was only a story, a shadow that haunted fragile creatures, never them. And because of this, they were proud, too proud. They built great cities on golden worlds. They carved monuments to themselves, higher than mountains, brighter than suns. They laughed at war because they could not be killed. They mocked pain because their wounds healed too fast. And they named themselves the Eternal Ones. But eternity is a dangerous gift. It made them cruel. It made them arrogant. And it made them blind. Across the galaxy, other races feared them, hated them, but never dared to fight. What weapon can you use against something that does not die? So the Illyrians ruled without question. For ages, nothing challenged them, until whispers began. In the council chambers of Illyrian High Command, a strange report arrived. A new species had been discovered. They were small, weak, and lived on a blue and green world far from the Illyrian core. They call themselves humans, said the messenger. Fragile, short-lived, they burn fast and die young. The Illyrians laughed. The council hall shook with their voices. Another mayfly race, said one. They will wither in a single breath, said another. What threat can a creature be, said their leader, when even time itself devours them? To the Illyrians, humans were not enemies. They were curiosities, insects crawling at the edge of the stars. And yet, there was something strange. In the reports, explorers spoke of humans who climbed mountains that killed 1,000 before them, of divers who went into the deepest oceans and returned alive, of wanderers who crossed deserts where death waited every step of the way, of soldiers who went to war knowing they would not return yet went anyway. This troubled some Illyrians. Why? They asked. Why would a mortal creature run into fire knowing it cannot survive? Why would they throw away a life that is already too short? But the High Command dismissed such worries. They act this way because they are desperate. They act this way because they have nothing else. They are a candle burning against the storm. And yet, a candle can burn brighter than the sun, if only for a moment. On the edge of Illyrian space, a soldier named Kalor looked at a human recording. It showed a battlefield on Earth. Men and women, bloodied and broken, still stood to fight. Their weapons shook in their hands, but they did not flee. One by one, they fell, but the rest held the line. Kalor felt something new in his chest. It was not admiration. It was not anger. It was something colder. Something the Illyrians had forgotten long ago. It was fear. The immortals had lived too long. They forgot what it meant to stand with death at your side. They forgot that courage is born not from living forever, but from knowing your time is short. In their pride, they had built a throne on the bones of weaker races. But now, somewhere far away, a new voice was rising, a voice that whispered through space, carried by every human heartbeat. We may die, but we do not kneel. The Illyrians laughed when they first heard of humanity. But deep within their shining cities, the first cracks of doubt began to spread. And the galaxy waited to see what would happen. When the deathless finally met those who carried death in every breath. The first meeting between Illyrians and humans was never planned. It happened by accident, like two storms crashing in the same sky. Far from Earth, on the rim of the galaxy, there was a mining world. It was a harsh planet, full of storms, sharp rocks, and endless nights. The Illyrians wanted its rare metals. The humans wanted the same. Neither side expected to find the other there. The Illyrians arrived first, their ships like blades of light cutting through the darkness. They moved with the calm of immortals. To them, the world was already theirs. But, days later, another fleet came. Human ships. Small, rough, not elegant like Illyrian vessels, but they carried flags, voices, and determination. When the Illyrians saw them, they laughed. "Mortals," whispered one captain. "They come here with rust and hope. They will run when they see us," another said. "Why fight for a world when their lives are so short?" And yet the humans did not run. They landed their ships, they built camps, they placed their machines into the rock, and they began to work. The Illyrians sent a message, a warning. "This world belongs to the eternal ones," their commander declared. "Leave now, or be swept away like dust in the storm." The humans answered, not with fear, not with surrender. Their reply was short. "This world belongs to no one. We will stay." It was not just a message. It was a challenge. The first meeting was not on a battlefield. It was in a wide canyon where human leaders walked out to face Illyrian envoys. The Illyrians stood tall, glowing with the light of their undying flesh. The humans stood tired, scarred, but unshaken. An Illyrian diplomat spoke with a voice like music. "You are fragile, you are small. Why fight us? You cannot win." The human leader, an old woman with steel in her eyes, simply answered, "Because we are alive." That is enough. Her words confused the Illyrians. Alive? What meaning was in that when life never ended? But the humans seemed to carry those words like a weapon. The tension grew. For weeks, both sides watched each other. The Illyrians expected humans to give up. They did not. They built walls. They trained soldiers. They dug deeper into the rock, working harder than any Illyrian miner ever would. At night, Illyrian soldiers saw humans laughing, singing, and sharing food around fires. They saw them fight storms together, carry each other when tired, and rise again after every failure. The immortals began to whisper. How could mortals live with such fire, knowing every day brought them closer to death? One night, an Illyrian scout approached the human camp. He wanted to see these mortals up close. He expected fear. Instead, he found children playing in the dust, drawing pictures of ships and stars. A young boy looked at him and asked, "Are you the ones who cannot die?" The Illyrian froze. The boy's voice carried no fear, only curiosity. "Yes," the Illyrian answered softly. "We are eternal." The boy tilted his head, then smiled. "Then you will never know what it feels like to win against time." Those words cut deeper than any blade. The Illyrian left, shaken. But peace could not last. A spark was all it took. A human patrol and an Illyrian patrol met in the storm. No one knows who fired first, but when the dust cleared, bodies lay broken on the ground. Some Illyrian, some human. The impossible had happened. An Illyrian had fallen, not from age, not from sickness, but from human hands. The news spread like wildfire. The immortals could be hurt. They could bleed. They could die. For the first time in thousands of years, the Illyrians felt something cold in their bones. It was not the storm. It was not the night. It was the shadow of death, finally reaching them. The High Command was furious. How could mortals do this? How could creatures with weak bodies and short lives strike down an eternal one? But soldiers on the front whispered a darker truth. The humans were not afraid. They knew they would die one day anyway. So they fought, harder, fiercer, and with a fire immortals could never understand. And so the first contact ended not with peace, not with trade, but with blood. The Illyrians looked at humanity and saw not insects, but wolves. Mortal wolves with sharp teeth, unafraid of death, ready to fight until the end. The galaxy had changed. The Eternal Ones were no longer the only power. For out of the dust, a fragile species had risen, and with every step they whispered, "We are mortal, and that is why we cannot be broken." The canyon of first contact was now silent. The humans had not left. The Illyrians had not forgiven. Two wills stood on the same ground, and there was only one way it could end. The first clash between immortals and mortals was coming. The Illyrian fleet circled the mining world like predators. Their ships gleamed with eternal light, smooth and perfect, weapons glowing with energy older than human history itself. To them, victory was not a question. It was tradition. Every war they had fought, they had won. Every enemy they had faced, they had crushed. But this enemy was different. This enemy did not tremble. Down on the ground, the humans prepared. Their ships were small, their weapons old compared to Illyrian technology, but their soldiers worked through the night, digging trenches, setting traps, and whispering to one another. Some prayed. Some laughed to hide fear. Some wrote messages to families they might never see again. But none of them thought of leaving. At dawn, the sky split open. Illyrian fire rained from above. Beams of light carved the rock. Explosions shook the earth. And the storm of war began. The immortals marched forward, glowing like gods, their armor unbroken, their voices calm. To them, this was nothing more than a small lesson for mortals who had forgotten their place. But when they entered the battlefield, the lesson twisted. The humans fought like no enemy the Illyrians had ever seen. Bullets struck against crystal armor. Explosions scorched Illyrian shields, but that was not what shocked them. It was the way humans fought. Wild, fearless, reckless. A human soldier saw an Illyrian twice his size and still charged, screaming with fury, pulling the enemy down even as he died. Another, her legs shattered, refused to stop firing, crawling forward until her last breath. A squad trapped between burning rocks stood their ground, firing until the flames consumed them. To Illyrians, it was madness. To humans, it was courage. The first Illyrian fell in that battle. A beam of human artillery struck his chest, cracking the crystal body that had stood for centuries. He screamed, not in pain but in disbelief. The soldiers who saw him fall did not understand at first. Their commander shouted, "Rise!" But the Illyrian did not rise. He lay still, broken, silent. The battlefield froze for a heartbeat, and then a roar of human voices filled the canyon. The immortals could bleed. The immortals could die. The Illyrians grew angry. Their calm broke. They unleashed storms of fire, tearing through trenches, shattering human lines. Dozens of mortals fell, in minutes, but the humans kept fighting. Every time an Illyrian struck one down, another appeared. Every time a wall crumbled, humans built a new one with their own bodies. The Illyrians realized something terrible. For them, battle was about survival. For humans, it was about meaning. A mortal life was short, but that was why they gave it so freely. Because to a human, death was not the end. It was the price of victory. In the heart of the chaos, a young human lieutenant led a desperate charge. Her armor was scorched, her face bloodied, but she screamed one order again and again. Forward! Her squad ran behind her, throwing themselves against Illyrian lines. One by one they fell, but their momentum broke the immortal formation. The Illyrians stumbled not from wounds, but from shock. How could creatures who lived only decades fight like this? How could they smile through pain? How could they run into death as if it were a friend? Hours turned into night. The canyon burned, filled with smoke, blood, and shattered stone. The Illyrians had killed hundreds of humans, but the humans had killed something greater. They had killed the illusion of Illyrian immortality. That night, Illyrian soldiers sat in silence. They looked at their glowing hands, their undying flesh, and for the first time in ages, they questioned. If mortals could bring down an eternal, then perhaps eternity was not so strong after all. Back in the human camp, survivors gathered. They buried their dead with songs, not silence. They lit fires, not to mourn, but to promise they would continue. Every soldier knew they might not live to see victory, but that was not important. What mattered was that humanity had shown the truth. They could stand against gods. News of the clash spread across the galaxy. Alien races whispered in hidden corners. The Illyrians, the deathless lords of the stars, had been wounded by a fragile species from a small blue planet. Some laughed in disbelief. Others trembled with hope. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy smelled change. And the spark of that change was humanity, weak, short-lived, but unbroken. The Illyrians had always asked, "What can a mortal do against eternity?" Now the answer was clear. A mortal can fight. A mortal can bleed. A mortal can die. And through death, a mortal can prove stronger than those who never face it. The first clash had ended, but it was only the beginning of a war that would shake the stars. The canyon battle had ended, but its shadow reached far beyond the broken rocks. The Illyrians had won the ground, but lost something greater. They had lost the illusion of perfection. They had lost the belief that nothing could ever touch them. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Illyrians felt fear. Across their shining empire, the news spread like cracks in glass. An eternal had fallen. Not to disease, not to age, not even to another godlike race, but to mortals, to humans. In the golden towers of Illyrian cities, whispers grew. What does it mean? Is it true? If they can bleed, can we all bleed? The High Command ordered silence. They told the people the reports were lies, twisted by frightened soldiers. They claimed the humans used trickery, that no mortal could harm an eternal. But soldiers who had been there did not forget. They had seen their own kind break, scream, and fall. They had seen the fire in human eyes, the fire of those who knew death and walked with it anyway. And that memory spread faster than orders. Among the common Illyrians, unease grew. They had lived in peace for too long, believing themselves untouchable. But now they looked at their glowing hands, their endless lives, and wondered, what if eternity was a cage? What if never dying made them weaker, not stronger? Mothers whispered to children about humans who laughed in the face of death. Scholars began to question, what power is greater, life without end or courage that burns even as it ends? And soldiers, once proud, stared at the stars in silence, dreading the next encounter. Inside the Illyrian palace, the council debated. They are insects, one lord declared. They throw away their lives because they have nothing else. We are still gods beside them, another replied quietly. And yet insects can kill gods if enough of them bite. The chamber erupted in anger. The idea that mortals could ever be a threat was poison to them. But poison spreads, even in immortal veins. Far away on human worlds, a different fire was rising. Stories of the clash spread among colonies and fleets. For centuries, humans had looked to the stars and wondered if they were alone. Now they knew they were not alone. Now they knew there were gods, and those gods could fall. The first fallen Illyrian became a legend. Songs were sung. Murals were painted. Children shouted his name as if he were a dragon slain by heroes of old, and every human soldier began to whisper the same vow. We are mortal, but we are not afraid. The Illyrians could not understand this. They gathered philosophers, priests, and generals to study the humans. Why did they fight like this? Why did they smile when facing death? Why did they refuse to kneel before immortality? One scholar gave a dangerous answer. They fight because death is certain. Every battle, every choice may be their last. That is why each act means more to them than to us. We live forever, so nothing has meaning. They die tomorrow, so everything does. The chamber grew silent. No one spoke against it, because deep inside they knew it was true. Fear spread like a sickness. Illyrian soldiers began to train harder, but not out of pride, out of desperation. Some wore new armor, heavier and stronger, though they had never needed it before. Some refused to leave their cities, claiming they were guarding the homeworld. And some simply disappeared, vanishing into the far stars, afraid to face mortals again. For a people who believed death was impossible, the thought of it became unbearable. In the human camp, the mood was different. Every death was heavy, every grave marked with stone or fire, but those graves were not symbols of weakness. They were banners of defiance. Each soldier who fell reminded the living why they fought. Each sacrifice whispered to the survivors, stand, Fight. Do not waste what we gave. The Illyrians saw this and trembled, because they could not imagine giving everything for a cause. They had never needed to. They had never dared to, and so a strange reversal began. The immortals grew restless, anxious, and doubtful. The mortals grew stronger, braver, and more united. The galaxy watched in silence. For ages, everyone had believed the Illyrians were untouchable. Now the cracks were visible to all. Other races began to whisper hope. If humans can break the deathless, maybe we can too. High Command met once more. This time their voices were quieter. Their pride still burned, but fear had rooted in their words. One commander said, "We must crush them completely. If not, their courage will spread to every corner of the stars." But another replied, "Crush them? How? They run toward our blades. They burn in our fire and still strike us down. How do you fight an enemy who welcomes death?" Silence filled the chamber again. For the first time, the Illyrians had no answer. The battle had ended, but the war had only begun. And though the Illyrians still held their empire, they had already lost something greater than territory. They had lost their certainty. They had lost their pride. For the first time in history, the Eternal Ones did not feel eternal. They felt the cold shadow of death at their backs, and that shadow had a name: humanity. The Illyrians still ruled the stars, but their grip was no longer unshakable. Every whisper of the humans, every rumor of their defiance, spread cracks through the empire. The deathless were no longer certain of themselves, and in those cracks, humanity grew stronger. On Earth, in crowded war rooms, human leaders studied every scrap of Illyrian knowledge. They learned quickly. Every weapon the immortals used was analyzed, copied, or reshaped into something humans could use. Every weakness found on the battlefield was studied until it became a strategy. Where Illyrians relied on their immortality, humans relied on their minds. And human minds never stopped searching for an advantage. The first alliances began here. For ages, smaller alien races had lived under Illyrian shadow. Some were servants, others slaves, others simply too afraid to rise. But now they watched humanity, and for the first time they saw hope. One by one they began to reach out. Whispers carried across the void. If humans can fight them, maybe together we can win. And so, ragged fleets of alien ships joined the human cause. Broken species offered knowledge, soldiers, even old grudges. Each alliance made humanity stronger. Each alliance made the Illyrians weaker. In the Illyrian High Council, anger burned. "They are insects uniting with vermin," said one commander. "Crush them now before they spread further." But another spoke with unease. "They multiply, they adapt. For every one we kill, 2 more rise. And now, they are not alone." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the immortals could no longer deny it. This was no longer a minor rebellion. It was the beginning of a war. On the front lines, the difference was clear. Human soldiers now fought beside alien warriors, combining weapons and tactics no Illyrian had ever faced. A small human frigate shielded by heavy alien armor. An alien plasma cannon fired with human precision. Each battle became more unpredictable. And unpredictability was something the Illyrians had never faced. They had ruled too long. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had forgotten what it meant to adapt. In the middle of this storm stood a human commander, Admiral Cara Vale. Her name became a legend among both humans and allies. She was not immortal, not untouchable. Her face bore scars. Her voice carried the weight of countless battles. But she stood at the front, never hiding behind fleets, always sharing the risks of her soldiers. To her crew, she said only one thing before each battle: "We do not need to live forever. We only need to live long enough to win." Those words became a fire in every soldier's chest. A creed stronger than Illyrian arrogance. The turning point came in a battle above a dying star. The Illyrians brought a fleet, grand and shining, expecting to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. But the humans and their allies did not fight in straight lines. They used the chaos of the stars' collapsing gravity. They hid ships in the fire of solar flares. They launched attacks from angles Illyrians had never considered. The immortals fought with order, the mortals fought with chaos, and chaos won. For the first time in memory, an Illyrian fleet was broken, scattered across the void. Their ships, once symbols of perfection, now drifted as burning wrecks among the stars' dying light. The galaxy trembled. The impossible had happened again. The deathless had been defeated. Word of the battle spread like wildfire. On distant worlds, slaves lifted their heads. On hidden stations, rebels whispered with new courage, and in Illyrian cities, fear grew like vines through marble halls. They are only mortals, Illyrian citizens said. How do they keep winning? They fight like they do not fear death. And that was the truth. Every human soldier knew they might not see tomorrow, but that only made them fight harder today. In the shadows of Illyrian power, some began to question their own leaders. Why fight a war against a species that could not be broken? Why waste eternity in fear? Others grew, harsher, demanding more blood, more destruction, more desperate measures to restore their pride. The council split, arguments echoing louder than ever before. Immortality had once made them untouchable. Now it made them fragile. Too much to lose, too much to fear. Back on Earth, Admiral Vale stood before her soldiers after the victory. She looked at the weary faces, the scars, the countless dead who would never return, and she said only this: they call themselves eternal. But eternity means nothing if it cannot stand against a moment. We are mortals, and that is our strength. Because when we give our moment, we give it all. Her words spread through every fleet, every camp, every allied world. It was the spark that turned rebellion into revolution. The Illyrians had thought themselves gods, but gods had fallen, fleets had burned, and whispers of death crawled through their empire. The turning point had come. The immortals were no longer untouchable. The mortals were no longer prey. And in the cold silence of space, a new truth began to echo. The galaxy did not belong to the eternal ones. It belonged to those brave enough to face death. The war that began with whispers now shook the entire galaxy. The Illyrians, once proud rulers of the stars, were no longer seen as gods. They were seen as prey. Every world they had enslaved, every species they had broken, now watched humanity rise. And one by one, those worlds began to resist. The empire that had stood for thousands of years started to crumble. The Illyrian fleets were still vast. Their weapons were still ancient and powerful, but their hearts were weak. Every soldier carried the memory of bleeding immortals. Every commander carried the weight of doubt. Meanwhile, the humans carried something else: purpose. Every battle was personal. Every death added fuel to their fire. They did not count years as the Illyrians did. They counted sacrifices. And each sacrifice was a stone in the road toward victory. The first true collapse came on the world of Saradith. For centuries, Saradith had been a jewel of Illyrian power, its cities carved from glass mountains, its people forced to kneel to immortals. But when human fleets arrived, the people rose. They did not wait for rescue. They took up old weapons, tools, even their bare hands, and joined the fight. Humans and Saradithians fought side by side, storming palaces, burning banners, breaking the chains of eternity. When the battle ended, an Illyrian governor lay dead in the dust, and over the city for the first time, a human flag rose beside alien voices shouting in freedom. The news spread faster than light. If Saradith could fall, then no world was safe. The Illyrian Empire, once eternal, was cracking from the inside. The council panicked. Some demanded total war, burning whole planets to ash. Others begged for peace, whispering that maybe eternity was not worth this endless fear, but no decision could stop the tide. Humanity and its allies pushed deeper into Illyrian space, battle by battle, system by system. In the skies above Ralvan Prime, the Illyrians gathered one of their greatest fleets. It was their last hope to show power, to remind the galaxy of their strength. Thousands of ships stood ready, their silver hulls shining like a wall of gods. And then the humans came. Not with elegance, not with perfection, but with fury. Their fleet was scarred, patched, and uneven, but it carried a spirit the Illyrians could not match. The battle lasted 3 days. Explosions tore through the void, debris rained on burning worlds, and death screamed across the stars. At first, the Illyrians fought with order, perfect formations, perfect timing. But humans and their allies fought with chaos, ambushes, tricks, sacrifices no Illyrian mind could predict. A small human corvette rammed an Illyrian dreadnought, tearing both apart. Alien allies launched suicidal strikes, blowing holes through the enemy lines. And everywhere, human voices roared across comms. Forward, forward, do not stop. By the third day, the perfect wall had broken. The Illyrian fleet, proud and eternal, was nothing but wreckage drifting in silence. For the first time, Illyrian citizens saw something they had never imagined, their empire losing. On distant worlds, riots broke out. Statues of immortals were torn down. Some Illyrians themselves began to desert, abandoning armies and fleeing into the deep stars. The empire that had ruled unchallenged for millennia now collapsed in months. At the heart of it all, Admiral Caravale stood with her fleet. Her ship was scarred, half its systems failing, but her voice remained steady. "Look at them," she told her crew. "Look at their fear. Immortality has chained them, not freed them. But us? We are free because we know our time ends. And that is why we will keep winning." Her words carried across every channel. Humans, allies, even Illyrians who listened in secret. The message was clear. Immortality was not strength. Mortality was.